You thief! Man finds girl wearing the necklace his deceased fiancée wore 18 years ago and rips it off her neck. Hello. Welcome. Like, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thomas was in his car, and although the day was beautiful, nothing was right for him. Since the death of his fiancée 18 years ago, he no longer saw beauty in life and in the world. He was now a bitter, insensitive, and even cruel person. He was quickly heading to his company, which was located in the city center in one of the most expensive commercial buildings in the region. Thomas had made his fortune in real estate and was seen as one of the most promising businessmen in his country. When he arrived at the building, he got out of his car and asked an employee to park his car. As he walked along the sidewalk and had bitter thoughts, an interesting figure caught his eye. A young woman who looked no older than 20 years old was selling flowers in front of the crowded area. She was a beautiful young woman in her white dress, holding flowers. Everything about her stood out from the surroundings of stone and people wearing suits and black and white clothes. She was like a real rose that grows in the middle of the concrete, but stands firm. It was the first time Thomas had seen this young woman, but her presence made him uncomfortable. Who does this woman think she is to keep bothering people with flowers? No one would want that. And no one really seemed interested in her flowers, but the young woman kept offering them with a beautiful smile on her face. Thomas continued on his way to the building and ignored the young woman. He went about his day in the same cold and bitter way. His life was like cold, bitter coffee that had lost its flavor, but he made sure to make his employees' lives as miserable as his own. Many were mistreated and suffered psychological pressure, but Thomas didn't care. In the following days, he kept seeing the same young woman in front of the building selling her roses, with the same smile as always. This began to bother Thomas. There was something about seeing people happy that bothered him, especially a person who was in the sun, selling roses in the middle of a crowd. He approached the young woman. "Good morning, sir. Would you like to buy a rose for your beloved or for a special person?" The beautiful young woman spoke amiably. "The one I loved is buried 6 feet under," he said bitterly with a cold face. The young woman was taken aback for a second, but tried to cheer Thomas up. "I'm sorry, sir, but love is something that transcends time and space. You can continue to love someone who is no longer among the living and love someone who is in the past. Love is something that never dies if we always feed it. I am sure that wherever your loved one is, she would love to have a reminder that you still love her, but it doesn't have to be a rose on her grave. A simple prayer for your loved one would make her very happy wherever she is." Thomas heard the young woman's words and thought, "She thinks that with this hippie talk she'll be able to convince me to buy one of those flowers." He had no patience for her. Thomas said, "I don't want a rose or anything like that. I just want you to get out of the way of the building where I work. It's annoying to see someone bothering my employees every day." The young woman finally wiped the smile off her face, and that made Thomas happy. "Sorry, sir, I didn't mean to bother you. I just need to help my sick father. I'll look for another place. Please forgive me." Thomas was relieved to see her give up. For a second he thought, "When did I become so cruel?" But that thought didn't cause him any remorse. The young woman bent down to pick up her basket of flowers, and from her neck appeared a beautiful necklace that had been hidden between her neck. Thomas froze when he saw it. His blood boiled, and without thinking he screamed, "You thief! Where did you get that?" The crowd passing by them stopped, and several eyes turned to the young woman. She, frightened to the point of speechlessness, stood still and tears streamed down her face. But despite the fear on his face, Thomas was relentless. He got even closer to her and pulled the necklace, breaking it. From the pull, the young woman's neck was left with a red mark around it, hurting her. She just cried, but Thomas couldn't hear her crying anymore. He was hypnotized by the necklace that he hadn't seen in almost 2 decades. There could be no other like it, because he had made it himself with the help of his grandfather when he was still alive. He and his grandfather had carved every detail of the necklace that was a gift for his beloved Alice. "Sir, what happened here?" A voice broke Thomas out of his trance, and he looked to the side. A police officer was talking to him. She took this necklace that was mine, but I already took it from her." As he said this, Thomas moved away from the young woman and the police officer grabbed her by the arms and took her away, and since then she has not returned to that street. Thomas returned to his office and looking at the necklace, he felt something running down his face. They were tears. It had been years since he had cried, since he had buried his heart with his beloved Alice. Memories flowed through his mind, taking him to the past he wished he had buried. Alice and Thomas were a young couple. She was only 18 at the time and worked as a maid in the house of a wealthy man. Thomas was a young man in his 20s who had only his grandfather as family. His grandfather was a gold miner and often returned home with gold and some precious stones. Thomas, wanting to help his grandfather, studied hard to improve his skills in creating accessories with the materials his grandfather brought. He created beautiful necklaces, rings, jewelry that attracted the attention of many people. They had a small shop and earned their living from it. In the first year of their relationship, Thomas decided to do something special for Alice. With his grandfather's permission and with his help, he created a necklace, which was made of gold and had a small diamond at the end. The necklace could be worth a good amount of money, but its symbolic value to Thomas was priceless. Alice cried when she received something so valuable, but which had a much deeper meaning for her. It was not in Thomas's plans, but seeing his beloved at that moment made him say the following words. "Will you marry me?" Alice almost screamed with joy and immediately said yes. The two of them were living the best days of their lives. However, there was something wrong with Alice. She seemed sad at times, but she always denied anything to Thomas. It was Christmas and Thomas was attending a soup kitchen. It used to be in his nature to help people. Every year he would go to the soup kitchen and help people deliver food to those in need. Alice would also go to the soup kitchen, but for some reason she didn't show up that day. He was worried and tried to contact her in every way, but Alice had no relatives, so the only way to find her was by calling her or going to her house, but she wouldn't answer his calls and wasn't home. A few days had passed and Thomas was desperate, but he finally received a call from her. "Honey, I was hiding from my boss. Please come and get me. He is a dangerous man. I never told you, but he always harassed me, but I needed the job, but I always denied his advances. When he found out about my engagement to you, he went crazy. Please help me." Thomas sounded cold and afraid of what was happening, but he asked for the address of where she was and went immediately to the place. But when he arrived at the place, there was nothing. More days passed and despair settled in Thomas's heart. One day, there was a knock on his door. There were two police officers. They had terrible news. His fiancée had died. Adalberto, Alice's boss, desperate to have her by his side, took the woman by force in his car, but Alice fought him and the car crashed and caught fire. With the coffin closed, Thomas buried his beloved and along with it his kindness and happiness. The young man's grandfather advised him that he should move on and not become so bitter, that this was not what she wanted, but Thomas was blind and deaf, because all he could hear and see was the pain and suffering he was going through. His grandfather thought it best to move to another city and take their store to another town. He thought that the move would bring a better life for Thomas, but it was in vain. Years passed and Thomas's grandfather passed away. Thomas sold the store and all of its jewelry. With the money, he went into real estate. 18 years passed, and Thomas's bank account grew larger and his heart grew colder. Now, he was in his office, looking at the necklace he had given to Alice as a token of his love. His mind was confused, but after his anger passed, he reasoned and thought that what he had done was foolish. How did she get that necklace? I should have asked. He had disappeared and was not found among the bodies in the car. Thomas now spent the whole day in front of the building waiting for that young woman to appear, but she never returned. He didn't even know her name. It would be extremely difficult to find her. Did she get arrested? When he wondered this, Thomas went to the nearest police station, and luckily he found the same police officer from that day. "What happened to that young lady?" Thomas asked. "Since you didn't report her, I just took her away from the area and told her that if she caused any more trouble, we would learn from her." Thomas was angry with the police officer. It would be harder to find her now. However, he realized that it was all his fault. He had no leads, but he didn't want to give up. A month had passed and Thomas was still trying to find the young woman. Luckily for him, he saw a glimmer of hope. His secretary was working and there was a vase of flowers on her desk. They were flowers similar to the ones the young woman was selling. "Where did you get those flowers?" he asked. "A young woman used to sell them across the street, but I only bought them for home. Now she's selling them in another neighborhood, and today I decided to bring them to work because I thought they made the place more beautiful. Do you want me to take them off?" Thomas smiled. "No, not at all. I thought they were so pretty that I was going to buy some for my office. Could you give me the address where this young lady sells them?" His secretary looked at him suspiciously. She, more than anyone, knew Thomas's reputation for being mean to people. Flowers were not something that suited his character, but she gave him the address. Thomas went immediately to the place and found the young woman there, selling her flowers with the same smile, but soon he disappeared when he saw him. "Please wait, I'm sorry about that day. I just need to know where you got that necklace," Thomas asked hurriedly. The young woman quickly picked up her flower basket and wanted to walk away, but Thomas soon spoke. "I'll pay whatever it takes, please tell me." The young woman stopped and thought. Despite her anger towards that man, she really needed the money. "Okay, I will tell you, but on one condition, you must give me back the necklace." Thomas said he would accept the deal, but he lied. He would never return the necklace, but he needed to get her to find out the information. "My father gave me this necklace. It belonged to my mother, but she passed away and I live alone with my father. However, he needs expensive medicine and can't work." Impossible, Thomas thought. Looking closely at the young woman, he noticed that she looked very much like his beloved Alice. Impossible, that was all he could think. A chill ran through Thomas's body. "Okay, I will return the necklace, but I will take it to your house and deliver it to your father." The young woman became angry and called him a liar, but with no choice she had to accept. "What is your name and your father's name?" he asked. "My name is Clara, my father's name is Adalberto." At that moment Thomas's blood boiled. It was the same name as the boss who took the life of his beloved Alice, but he was supposed to have died in the accident. Thomas tried to hide his emotions from Clara and she gave him her address. Later that day, Thomas was at the door of his house. Clara opened the door and told him he could come in, but to wait, as he hadn't yet spoken to his father about what happened. However, Thomas didn't hear her and entered the house looking for Adalberto. "Ao entrar na sala, ili viu hamem velho idoent, deitado uma cama de hospital com uma cadeira de rodas do lado." Thomas nunca viu Adalberto pessoalmente, mas via várias fotos dele quando pesquisou sobre o acidente. Você, Thomas avançou Adalberto, mas Clara caiu na defesa de seu pai. "Stop!" she screamed. Thomas, blinded by rage, pulled Clara hard by the arm, but the young woman would defend her father with all her life. She wouldn't let go of Thomas, who tried in every way to attack Adalberto. Adalberto saw that Clara was getting hurt, because even without Thomas doing anything to her, he was a big man and the simple fact of trying to hold him hurt her, so he shouted, "Stop, Clara, let him do what he has to do." Both Clara and Thomas stopped. "My daughter, please let him go, he is not to blame," Adalberto spoke softly. They both fell silent, but Adalberto broke it. "I will be direct, I think you are confused about what is happening. Thomas," he said, "you were supposed to be dead. What happened to Alice, and why do you have her necklace? And Clara is her daughter." Adalberto, without ceremony, spoke. "I was obsessed with Alice, but she only had eyes for you. From the first day she worked in his house, he fell in love with her. No matter how much he tried to make her fall in love with him, Alice wouldn't let Thomas go. She didn't quit her job just because she needed the money. When he found out that Alice was getting married, Adalberto became even more jealous and locked her in his house. Using his money and power, he faked the accident and paid 2 police officers to give the false news to Thomas. After a few months of being deprived of leaving the house, Adalberto noticed that Alice's belly was growing. She was pregnant. This made him even more angry. Alice tried in every way to escape from the place, but she never managed to. 9 months passed and Alice gave birth to Clara. Adalberto was tired of Alice's escape attempts and finally let her out, but he wouldn't let it go easily. Adalberto ran away with Clara. Alice was desperate and looked for Clara, but she never found her. She also tried to look for Thomas, but he no longer lived in the same place. Since then, Alice's whereabouts have been unknown. Adalberto raised Clara as his daughter and told her many lies. However, time and age took their toll on the man, who soon developed several health problems. In addition, his fortune had run out. All he had of value was a necklace he took from Alice before he ran away with Clara. Since then, the two lived as father and daughter. Thomas sat on the couch. The world around him seemed to spin. Clara was his daughter, and Alice was still alive. Clara was crying, unable to believe that her father had done so many horrible things. Thomas looked at the girl. She was the daughter of his love with Alice. As he looked at her, he noticed her neck was purple because of the necklace he pulled off of her. He also noticed that her arm was red from him pulling her away. I became a monster too. I did this to my own daughter. Thomas burst into tears. He was now a 40-year-old man who cried like a child. He begged Clara for forgiveness, but his voice was choked and she could barely understand, but even without understanding she felt what he was saying. She wiped her tears and said, "Dad, where is my mother?" Adalberto looked into space and gave an address. The last time I heard from her, she had been living in this house, but it had been almost 10 years. "Mr. Thomas," Clara said, "can you take me to my mother?" "Sure," Thomas said, wiping his tears. In the car, the two were silent. "I know you're my father, but don't expect me to call you that," Clara said, breaking the silence. "I understand, I did horrible things to you. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I have become a horrible person. I have been weak. I will try to change. Once again, forgive me." The two arrived at a beautiful house. "I'll go first," said Clara. Clara knocked on the door of the house and a woman she had never seen before opened it. "I would like to speak to Alice," Clara said. "It is her, what do you want?" Alice said. Clara cried and smiled at the same time. "I am Clara, your daughter." Now they both cried. With one hug, Alice felt all the pain go away, all the suffering she had been through in the past few years. My daughter, my daughter. I can't believe it." There were no words to express what Alice was feeling at that moment. She didn't think even the angels could create a word to describe how happy she was. The two talked for half an hour while Thomas waited anxiously in the car. Suddenly, Alice hit the car. When Thomas saw her, he got out immediately. "My love," he said. "Darling," she said, crying. The two hugged and couldn't take their eyes off each other. "My love, what a handsome man you have become," she said. "Time has not been so kind to me, and I have grown quite old," Alice said. "I hope you still love me, even though I am older and more worn out." Thomas smiled. "My love, you are still the most beautiful woman in the world, and nothing and no one will make me think otherwise. I love you." The two then kissed and realized that the love between them had not changed even after so many years. They had a lot to talk about. Alice told everything she had suffered in recent years. Thomas told her his whole life story. And Clara told her what her life with Adalberto was like. Alice and Thomas wanted something in common: retribution for all the suffering Adalberto had put them through. They both said they would go to the police station immediately to report him for everything he had done. However, Clara held him back. "I know you hate him, but even though I know everything he did, I can't hate him. He raised me like a father and always treated me well and with affection. Besides, he's already old and sick. Please, I know I'm asking a lot. I know I'm asking the impossible, but please don't do anything to him." A year passed. Alice and Thomas lived together and finally got married. Alice had overcome all the pain she had been through in the past few years and was now a happier woman. Thomas tried to make amends with all the people who mistreated him, and everyone in the company noticed his change. The difference was so great that his profits increased considerably. Clara lived with her parents and stopped selling flowers. She was now in college, but she made a point of taking care of her parents' garden. Every weekend he went to a nursing home where Adalberto was staying. He lived in this home at Clara's request. Thomas, in an almost saintly gesture, paid for a good nursing home for Adalberto at Clara's request. She visited him and was the only ray of sunshine in his life. However, Adalberto could never forgive himself for what he had done and was constantly haunted by nightmares. Claire and Thomas moved on. The two decided never to see Adalberto and entrusted him only to their daughter. They knew that the love they had now was greater than any return. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.